All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Grady, and I'm a business immigration attorney at the Grady Firm in Southern California. We have been practicing H-2B visa law since about 2018. So we've been through many seasons now, and how many times this has changed pretty much every year. So without calling ourselves an expert, we are pretty well versed in this very, very niche visa. And while we do practice other types of business immigration, this is going to be the subject of today's topic. And I'd also like to introduce Will Reyes. We have been working on these presentations and working together for the last year or so, and we have had our employers successfully bring workers from El Salvador through his program. So I would like to introduce Will.
Oh, thank you very much, Jen. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Wilfredo Reyes. You guys can call me Will. And I'm here on behalf of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID's H-2 visa program, which is a joint program between the U.S. government and the governments of El Salvador that are aimed to reduce the problems caused by the worker shortage in the U.S., help bolster sales, help bolster manufacturing, while at the same time reducing irregular immigration to the U.S. Right now, we are living in a situation in which, in the United States, there are more jobs than people, and here in El Salvador, we have more people than jobs. So it fits very well, and it provides legal means for the Salvadoran workers to go to the U.S. and then come back at the end of their contracts and live a plentiful life here with their families. But we're going to go into much more detail later on. But I'm really happy to be here with Jen. We've worked together on many of these, and I hope that we can help you guys out.
Fantastic. And whether you have thought about working with workers from El Salvador, it may be of interest because for the last few years, Congress has authorized additional visas once the cap is reached, because this is a very popular visa. There are more applicants than spots for it. And they've had additional supplemental visas for returning workers and for workers from the Northern Triangle, which includes El Salvador. So you may or may not need those workers now, but if it comes to you needing to do the supplemental visas, then you're going to be wanting to give Will a call. Great, thank you. All right, so just a quick disclaimer, wouldn't be a legal presentation without it. This is for informational purposes only. It does not create an attorney-client relationship, and it's just some basic overviews, but each case has its own situation and nuances, so we recommend you speak with a licensed attorney. Okay, so first of all, what are H-2B visas? I'm going to go ahead and talk about the substantive part of the program, and then we'll talk about the supplemental workers. So H-2B visas, we see them very commonly used in businesses that need workers for a seasonal or peak or one-time need. So a seasonal need might be every summer we have an increase in workers. For example, hotels, resorts might be busy in the summer. Ski resorts might be more busy in the winter. So they have this temporary need, or perhaps it is creating getting started with a new business. You may have a temporary need, but you're going to have to show that this is that there are not enough U.S. workers who are able, willing, and qualified and able to do the temporary work, that employing these workers will not adversely affect the wages and conditions of the U.S. employees, and the need is temporary. So that cannot be because you have people on vacation or because people are out. When we do this application, we have to show that this need happens and it's reoccurring every year. So for example, every summer, this hotel needs workers from August to October, and our payroll records show that, our sales records show that we have increased revenue or restaurant sales or room sales. And so we would use all of that documentation in step 2 of the process to explain why we have this seasonal need. And then the part about not adversely affecting U.S. workers is kind of the main purpose of Department of Labor. They want to protect U.S. jobs, especially now that economy has been changing again. So every time economy goes down, U.S. Department of Labor kind of ratchets up their review of cases. So the period of stay is going to depend on, again, what we get in your temporary labor certification, and that's going to be based on your records. So if every year you can show, and we actually make charts and graphs to show the increase in the demand and the decrease in your workers, and typically that's about 6 to 9 months. And so the workers will come here for that time, then they go home right when that period ends, and then if they're going to come back, they would come back the following year. And so keep in mind, if someone has another H, like an H-2A, is pretty common that those workers might also come on an H-2B. So that would count towards their, if it's 3 years in a row, but pretty much they would go home and come back. And so in order to do H-2Bs, you have to be on an eligible countries list. Otherwise, we have to do a little bit of extra work to say why they wouldn't. So I checked this last night, and as of last year, November 10th, 2022, these are the countries that permit the H-2B program. Usually this is by treaty with the countries in the United States. And there were a few additions this year over last year, so you can just take a look at this, and you can always find that online as well. So the biggest difference between this visa and other visas, it's similar to the H-1B in that there is an annual cap, and that is because we have more demand than we have number of visas. And so I'm referring to last year's numbers because each year this changes, and Congress has not yet released the visas for 2024. So sometimes we are, hoping it will be as good or better than the prior year, but I am anticipating probably not having that announcement till November or so. So there are 65,000 visas. Well, there's 66,000 visas total. 33,000 for the October 1st start date and another 33,000 for the April 1st start date. And as you can imagine, people with summer jobs like landscape contractors, hotels, and resorts are all competing for 33,000 visas. And so we do a lottery in early January. Now, every year those fill up for the springtime. And this year is the first time they did a lottery over the summer for the October 1st start date. And so last year what they did was, instead of just increasing the cap, I guess their compromise is having supplemental visas. And so they authorized another 20,000 for nationals of the Northern Triangle countries, which include Haiti, Guatemala, Jamaica, and El Salvador. And then there were also additional visas for remaining workers. So the way that this worked was, when they do the lottery, they'll assign your, well, I'll get into MSAs, but they assign each application you make to a group between A and G. And the ones that had A's had the best chance of making it all the way through to have their application approved. But if they had a lower number, then they had an additional chance with that once that ran out to either try returning workers or workers from the Northern Triangle. And so that is where we'll come in later and talk about those supplemental visas. And so, as I mentioned, the need must be temporary, and it will be, if it's seasonal, which is the most common type of need, it would be tied to a season of the year by an event or pattern that reoccurs. And so it cannot be if it's unpredictable or vacation time. It has to be pretty much the same every year. And sometimes when we've done this more than 1 year, the date of need might be 15 days apart, but you're still going to have to justify that to the Department of Labor. Or you might have peak load need, which is maybe Christmas season, we need extra workers, or a spring break, something like that. Intermittent need would be occasionally or intermittent, or a rare one-time occurrence. Perhaps there was a fire or a natural disaster and you need extra workers to help with the cleanup. But honestly, we've really only done applications for the first, which is the seasonal need. And so in terms of how many applications you need to prepare, you would do one application for each job type and for each MSA job location. So an MSA is a metropolitan statistical area. So it's not limited just to the city. And it's not necessarily based on the county. So I have a copy of this map. So in Southern California, for example, we have an MSA, it's Los Angeles and Anaheim. We have another one for San Diego, another one, Riverside, San Bernardino, And so if we had, for example, landscape contracting in San Diego and LA and Riverside County, we'd have 3 MSAs, and so we'd have 3 applications. And then if we had one landscape contractor job and a tree cutting job, then that would be additional MSAs. And so when we do each of the steps throughout the application, which I'll mention below, each of those will be distinct based on the MSA and the job type. Okay, so we have already talked about the lottery, but just here's what it looks like in writing. And so the way that this works is we start prevailing wage, step 1. We're going to be working on that now. We file the labor condition application and statement of need for the April start date, that is January 1st, and for the October 1st start date, we start the application in May, and we're doing the LCA around 4th of July. So really, we're spending many months preparing to then have them come here for a specific period of time. And so the requirements for the employer, there are quite a few. So when we have new clients, I send them all of the fact sheets from Department of Labor that have all of the different requirements. But one of the main points is that you have to pay the prevailing wage. And so the first step that we're doing, and last year we filed them in November. This year we'll be starting earlier in October, because they take about 40 to 45 days to get back, and you don't want to be getting that back right over Christmas before we file the LCA in January. So we prepare this application, we file it online with the Department of Labor, and in about 30, 40, 60 days, they'll come back to us, and then they'll say, this is the minimum wage that you have to pay for this job in this location. So that's why we have different applications for each MSA, because the minimum wage in each location will be different, and that's based on statistical data that the Department of Labor uses. So say landscaping in one MSA is $16, and another one it might be $17.10. And so you have to agree to pay at least that amount. You can always pay more if you want to be competitive, but you have to agree to pay that amount. And it has to be a bona fide full-time temporary position of at least 35 hours per week. I know sometimes maybe you want to do part-time, but it has to be 35 hours a week. And then there's a 3/4 guarantee, which means that if you can't offer them that full amount that you promised, you would have to pay them for that anyway. And that's just based on paying at least 75% of the workdays in a 12-week period. So if that ever comes up, we would chat with you about that and how to handle it. And so we want to make sure that you have a lot of record keeping in case there is any audit in the future by Department of Labor. And so you have to keep accurate records of their earnings, the hours of work offered, and hours actually worked. So all the payroll records. You have to make sure you're giving them wage statements at least every 2 weeks, or according to the practice in your local area. And then definitely all of these workers must be W-2 employees. They cannot be independent contractors. And you can't, and basically everything has to be the same with the foreign workers and the US workers. We can't have one getting terms more or less favorable than the other. And a lot of times people ask me, do I have to pay for housing for them? And so you would, if it's something that you offer the workers. For example, maybe they're working in a very remote area and you offer corporate housing. In that case, you would. But if it's something that they can do on their own, and you don't pay for your US employees, then you wouldn't have to pay for them. But you do have to pay for their transportation, and that would be from their point of origin. So say they were coming from Jalisco, Mexico, you would pay for them to come to the United States, and including daily wage reimbursements up to, I believe, $56 or so, and they would give you the receipts for that, and you would book reasonable hotel if you need. If it's somewhere in the continental US, people might book a charter bus. And if they're coming from another country where they'd have to fly, you can either book the flight for them or you can reimburse them if they work for the first week. And so if they are returning home at the end of the job, then you would need to pay for their return transportation unless they're going to another H-2B at another employer. And then if they do abandon the job, you'd have to report them within 2 days to Department of Labor. Okay, and so then in terms of layoffs, they don't want you to lay off U.S. employees 120 days before the need, because if you're laying them off, why would you need the foreign workers? And retaining all the documents for up to 3 years. So here, let's go through the process. It's a multi-step process, and it has very, very specific deadlines and timelines. So the first thing that we would do is apply for the prevailing wage. As I mentioned, this year we're going to start doing those in October so that we can get them done and have them back by November, and then work on step 2. So we fill out a form in the portal, and we would chat with our clients about that and really make sure that we understand what the need is, and we have all the details of the job. And we're going to do one of these for each MSA and for each job type. And we keep in mind that you're kind of stuck with what you put in here for the job duties, so you want to make sure at the outset that it's exactly what you need and the minimum requirements are correct. So for employers who, I mean, you can do this now, you can do this later, but if you're looking for a lot of workers, you may want to start your recruitment process now. And that might be asking current employees if they have friends and family members. A lot of clients, at least in Southern California, have workers from Mexico. So they'll ask them, do you have any friends and family back home that would be interested? And maybe they're all from the same town, and then they would go there and interview them all at the same time. You can also speak with Will, and he'll tell you a little bit about their process. So for clients whose employees don't have contacts, that's a great way to start getting workers. There's also paid recruiters. If you do use them, then you have to disclose it. But we recommend working with people that that are vetted if possible. And so once we file that and we get that back, we start working on your statement of temporary need. And this is a persuasive document where we're telling the Department of Labor why you need this number of workers during this specific visa period. So for example, if you need 12 truck drivers from October 31st to March 31st, we would say, why? Okay, it's because we're transporting gifts for Christmas or items for the flu. Or we are doing landscaping and we have twice as much need in the summer when people are using parks and it's hot and dry, as opposed to the winter when it's cold and rainy. And that is going to depend on perhaps the weather and the patterns in the city where you need the workers. And so we often ask our employers to document their efforts to recruit, post any job ads, and show that you weren't able to get a response to those. And then as part of the recruitment process, you will actually have to actively recruit U.S. workers. And then we will take these documents also once your LCA is approved, and we'll include them in the petition as well. And so for the April 1st start date, we have a 2 or 3 day window around the first of the year where we would apply, and they would then do the lottery, and you should know in the first few days of January if you have a high chance of making it through the lottery. And for the October 1st date, this year there was a lottery right around July 3rd. Okay, so then at the time we file the LCA, we also have to file a job order, and that is with the state workforce agency in the state where the job is. So if you have jobs in Massachusetts and Florida, you'd have to post each one on the state workforce agency website. We would work with you to tailor the job order, and it would also match what you have in your LCA and your prevailing wage. And then very specific dates on when you do this. So once you get your temporary labor certification approved, then you have to recruit U.S. workers. And so remember, we said Department of Labor is really trying to protect U.S. jobs. And so they want to really be sure that you've tried and done the recruitment in the United States. So for the H-2Bs, it's a pretty simple process. You would post it on the state job board website. If we do the green card, which is a more complex process, you have to actually do paid newspaper ads. But in this case, you're going to post it for about 15 days, and then you're also going to post it at the local work site, and if you have a website, on your website. And then once you do that, you're going to prepare a recruitment report, and it would say, I posted this on this day in this location. This is how many people applied, and then you have to actually interview them if they meet the qualifications. And it can't be subjective, like I didn't like them, but it would have to be maybe they didn't want to locate to the place of the job, or they didn't have qualifications for the position. And so we would have to include that in the report, why those U.S. workers weren't qualified. And if you do find qualified U.S. workers, but maybe you have an opening for 12 spots and you do hire 2 U.S. workers, then you would be able to have 10 spots left for the foreign workers. And so once we get through all those pieces, then we get to the I-129 petition, and that is what we would file with USCIS. And this is the part where we pay the filing fee, and it's going to be $420 per application. So remember, per job, per location, we'd be submitting a petition. And also, if you do have multiple locations, they might get different numbers in the lottery. So for example, we could have Los Angeles gets group A, San Diego gets group G, and Tampa MSA gets group C. Well, probably only that one that got the A would be proceeding to this point. And because everything is time sensitive, in this case, we would definitely use premium processing. So for an additional $2,500 fee per application, you'll get your response in 15 business days. And so usually we get to this stage in about February for the April 1st dates, and in August for the October start date. Then once you get your application, after you celebrate, we will have the consular or embassy review. And so a lot of times clients may potentially do this part on their own, or we would help review your DS-160 to make sure everything is consistent, because you don't want to go through all this work and then the worker gets denied based on some weird thing that they have in their background. So we do prefer to actually take a look at those. And then they're going to attend an interview at the consulate or embassy that is closest probably to where they live. A consular interview will review the application and their background and qualifications. So again, you don't want to have a candidate that might have something in their background. You really want to screen for that before you get to this point, especially if we have to name the workers. If you don't have to name them, then you can always swap them out before they come to the United States. And then they will keep the passport for a few days and the visa stamp, and then they can either have that expedited to their home or come back and pick it up. And that's something they would decide with the consulate. And if they are bringing spouses or unmarried children under 21, they would come at this time as well. And they would have an application, the DS-160 for themselves as well. This fee should be about $190, and there may also be a reciprocity visa fee. You just have to check with Department of State for your country to see about that. And so then again, transportation, this can either be via plane, via chartered bus, and you would, depending if it's a group, it may be more easy for you to just get a bus and have a representative of the company meet them either at the consulate or at the border, or hire a local point of contact to help make sure this all gets arranged, and then reimbursing them for this transportation if they complete the first week. And so at the end of the period, they have to return home at the conclusion of the period, and there may be a short grace period, about 10 days or so, and that would be on their I-94. And they would want to leave by that time so that they don't start accruing unlawful presence and preventing themselves from being able to return. And so then, as I mentioned, if they complete at least 50% of the job period, you would have to pay for their return transportation. And then to bring them back, you would have to apply for them the following year. But there may be an opportunity for supplemental visas for the returning workers. So it's always great if you make it that first year, then your chances are potentially better for the next year. And then if anybody does not have either a temporary need or it's something that's cross-country, for example, we do EB3 green cards for a lot of truck drivers, because if they're driving across the country, that would be hundreds of MSA areas. And so that's really impractical for the purpose of H-2B. Or somebody says, you know what, I really need these workers year round. Then we can do the green card process, which is a similar process, but more expanded. Right now it's taking about 2 to 3 years. So this is an option, but it's definitely not an immediate option. It's more of a long-term solution. But when they are approved, they will get a green card, which is good for 10 years. They can get citizenship after 5, and they can also bring their spouse and children under the age of 21. So for further resources, we have an entire page dedicated to H-2Bs on our website, gradyfirm.com, under the resources tab. And there we have videos, we have blogs, and lots of information. We have a monthly newsletter, and we have a blog also on the resources page that has all the latest news for immigration and employment law for U.S. employers. And if you'd like to learn more about this, we recommend that you schedule a consultation as soon as possible, since we're almost in October and we'd like to get those prevailing wages in the next few weeks. And I would say realistically no later than November 7th, so that you can be sure to get that back before January 1st. So now I'm going to hand this over to Will and let him tell us about the USAID program. So,
thank you very much, Jen. Let me just share my screen here. Share. Can you guys see it?
yes.
All right, awesome. So thank you guys very much for being here. Thank you, Jen, for giving me this opportunity to speak to some of your contacts and for that awesome presentation of yours. As I mentioned before, my name is Wilfredo Reyes, and I'm here on behalf of the United States Agency for International Development's H-2 visa program in El Salvador. Our main goal is to support American families and businesses through Salvadoran talent. There we go. Here we go. All right, so here's just a general disclaimer. It's like this isn't legal advice per se, but if you have any questions, we're going to go over them later, and you can always contact us if you have any burning questions that come up in the middle of the night. You can email me, and I will read them the next morning. So as I mentioned before, the H-2 temporary work visa program is possible thanks to international treaties, as Jennifer mentioned, this time around between the government of El Salvador and the government of the United States. We seek to provide American employers with the necessary workforce to cover their needs to ensure proper staffing for their companies. At the same time, we reduce irregular immigration by providing legal channels through which Salvadoran workers can travel to the U.S. and live the American dream, albeit temporarily. As an official United States government initiative, the H-2 visa program in El Salvador has a lot of very, very great perks. One of them is uninterrupted contact and direct contact with the U.S. consulate here in El Salvador. If I, for example, Will Reyes, wanted to make an appointment to get my visa renewed right now, I would call the consulate and they would most likely tell me that I can get a slot open for an interview around March, more or less, because there's a huge backlog ever since COVID, and they still haven't been able to catch up. However, since we are a program, we basically drop off packages full of passports every week, sometimes twice or 3 times per week. So that really cuts down on any waiting time when compared to trying to get visas processed in someplace else in the world. We take care of all the DS-160 filing. We have trained personnel that's been trained by the consular officers at the consulate and the embassy to minimize any errors. And this really helps move things along at a very brisk pace. Under regular conditions, the consular section requires a minimum of 21 days to process a visa, but that's just something that they say. If we're really lucky, let's say, for example, if you email us and you give me all the necessary documents today, we might have your visas for you next week. So, again, this is the 21 days. It's kind of like a disclaimer mentioned by the consular section. Our visas are given priority by the consulate. That means that you get quicker results and also more efficient results. Since we again are a U.S. Government program, we have a certain level of credibility because we do a lot of legwork before any candidates go to the consular section. We do a lot of background checks. We make sure that they don't have any police records, they've never been arrested, that these people have never tried crossing the border illegally before, etc. And that has given us the great advantage of having, like, for example, in fiscal year 2022, we closed the year with a 95.83 visa approval rate. I actually challenge anybody to find a better approval rate anywhere else. I think that's crazy. And actually, for 2023, we're closer to 97%. So, it goes to show that all the legwork that we as a program do really favors you guys because you don't have to pay the extra visa MRB fees over and over again if somebody gets denied. Obviously, there are occasionally, there's somebody that gets denied, but you can't really argue with a 95 to 97% approval rate. I also would like to mention at this point that the MRV fee was recently increased. It's no longer $190. It's now $205 per person. They made that change a couple of weeks back, basically because the H-2 program is growing so much around the world that the government thought to bump it up a little bit. As Jennifer mentioned, there is a cap for H-2B visas, which is generally 66,000 across the board. And as you guys already know, 66,000 just, such an arbitrary number. That's not going to cover all the needs of all the businesses in the United States that need extra workers. And that's where we come in as the supplementary visas. In 2022, the U.S. government gave the Northern Triangle countries 11,000 supplemental visas. This year, in 2023, it was 20,000 supplemental visas. And since we're looking at the trend of growth here, and so we're expecting for 2024 that we're going to have even more visas available. We hope so. There have been even some talks of eliminating the cap for the Northern Triangle, but that's just a pipe dream unless I see Congress vote on it and approve it. But 20,000 additional visas, that's always really good because let's say, for example, you're hiring from Mexico and you run out of visas because you went through the lottery process and you're in group F. You're out of luck. However, if you're hiring from El Salvador, we have the extra supplemental visas. And as an added bonus, at least so far up to this date, there is no lottery for the Northern Triangle countries. So you won't have to worry about being there at midnight, ready to press enter on your computer to file any applications and make sure that you get a good slot. There's no lottery for the Northern Triangle. There's no lottery for El Salvador, and that makes things a lot easier for you guys. The worker shortage doesn't care about the visa cap. So we're working hard to alleviate that pressure from you guys. So what are the requirements for the workers in our case? Okay. Jennifer they already gave you the requirements for the employers, but for the workers, it's a little bit different. You got to be, first off, a Salvadoran of 18 years of age. Some states allow workers to be as young as 18, others as 21. So we use 18 as a baseline. And that's why it's really important when you contact us that you give us a lot of useful information, mainly anything that you have in the job order, where the job is going to take place, what the salaries are going to be, any English requirements, etc. That was going to help us find the right candidates for you guys. As a second requirement for the Salvadoran workers, they have to have a clean migration profile. That means that if somebody tried crossing the border illegally back in 1979, that means they cannot work for us, unfortunately. And it's really sad because some people no longer want to just go to the U.S. and stay there regularly, but we're not mind readers and we don't have the manpower to do extensive psychological checks on everybody. So this is a standard rule. Nobody that's crossed any borders, even going through Guatemala or Mexico, if they were caught going to the United States, they cannot participate in the program because we're looking for people that are willing to go, work a couple of months, make some money, and then come back. And they do not. The final requirement is that they cannot have any criminal records or they cannot have any pending judicial processes. Okay, so that way we're going to make sure that we're sending people that are good, people that have not broken any laws, to work for your companies. And they can also not have any pending judicial processes, because we don't want to help anybody escape the law by jumping into the United States. Also, this also applies to family court cases. Let's say, for example, if we have a father that hasn't paid child support, they cannot participate in our program. So for the recruitment, Jennifer spoke a lot of everything going on the United States, all the paperwork that goes in the United States. But we are specialists in the recruitment field. It's like we scour every single corner, every nook and cranny of El Salvador, and we hold either massive events like the one you're seeing on the screen right now, where we give information up to 1,000 workers at a time, or sometimes we go to very targeted and specialized venues. Let's say, for example, very recently, actually last week, we held an event for, I cannot say which company, but a rather large cruise company that were looking for a lot of chefs, a lot of servers, and some other personnel. And that, I'm not going to go to a random town in El Salvador to look for chefs. I'm going to go to the top restaurants in the country. I'm going to go to the top culinary schools in the country, which we have alliances with, and they give us access to their students, graduates, and students past and present and past. And that way we can make sure to find the best candidates that the country has to offer. So we screen all these workers, and then we create very informative worker profiles for everybody that passes the inspection, or the vetting, as we call it. So we very recently changed the template, but for every worker that we interview, if they pass the vetting, no criminal record, no migratory record, and they do say, and then they have some relevant worker experience, everything is certified by us, by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in El Salvador. They spend quite a lot of time making phone calls to certify that this person is who they say they are, and they have worked where they say they have worked, and we come up with these profiles. Again, this is an old format for the profile, but basically you can see all the information that's there. You can see if back a couple of months ago, it was important for us to know, how many COVID vaccines they had. That's not really the case anymore, so we're probably going to get rid of that. But you can see if they have relevant experience, if they have any area of expertise that they would like to share, anything that would probably catch your eye as an employer. That's all included in the profiles that we provide you guys. And once we send you the profiles, you guys can decide on the multiple ways to proceed. First off, and easier, it's the online interviews. Okay, so let's say, for example, we got Luana. Luana emails me and says, Will, I'm looking for 50 housekeepers. Please send me some profiles. I'm most likely going to send you your human resources or your recruitment team can go over the profiles, and then you can say, it's like, Will, we would like to interview this many people. And we would organize online interviews for you guys to do it without leaving the comfort of your own office. We would gather the workers in most cases, so they go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, since we can ensure there's good and stable internet connection there. But in some occasions, that's not possible because some people just live way too far from the city. But we try to facilitate it as much as possible. That way, nobody's going to get left behind just because it was an overcast day. But you guys can decide on having online interviews, and then decide, out of everybody that we interviewed, we would like to offer jobs to these people. Or you can decide to do in-person interviews. That's my actual favorite. It's like we spend a lot of time organizing very big events in which we have people coming in from the United States. We set up shop. Let me go to the next slide. We set up a shop at a very suitable venue. It can be at a hotel or someplace else. If they're looking, I remember we did a very big event for some Alaskan fishing company out at the beach, because that's what they wanted to do. And we had a lot of candidates from that area. So it was very suitable. So just because it's work, it doesn't really mean it can't be fun. So we set up a nice venue for you guys to come and do the interviews. We have a lot of experience doing these kind of events. Very recently, we did an event in which we interviewed, not we, but the visiting companies interviewed 1,689 candidates in 5 days, out of which 927 got excellent interview scores and 463 received very good scores. We're also very good at keeping track of the scores that you give everybody. Let's say, for example, if we have Lily and she actually just needs 20 people, but she approved 30, we're going to know which ones you gave the best scores. And by the time you ask me, Will, I need TCCM profiles, it's not going to be on Lily to remember who got the best scores. We're going to have that information, and we're going to give you the profiles in that order. After you do the interviews, actually, there's one more way in which we could do this, and this is actually more viable for companies that have worked with us in the past. You can forego the interviews altogether. We have some companies in which we just send them the profiles, they look over the profiles, and they trust the program so much that they say, well, I want to hire these people. And there we go. I'm not expecting this to happen the first year that we're going to be working with you guys, but since we hope to keep the program going for as long as possible, maybe next season or the following season, to just say, you know what, I trust you guys. Please give me these 10 people. I don't need to interview. Once that interview phase is over, we go to the visa process. Okay. And like I mentioned before, we take care of everything pertaining to the visa. A lot of workers, especially in some fields such as landscaping, for example, they're not really, they don't speak English, or yeah, some of them do, of course, but some of them might not speak English. And you guys, obviously being American, perhaps you've never filled out a visa form, and everything is in English. So we actually have our teams. We summon the workers to go to the embassy, to our offices. We fill out all the DS-160 forms, and we take care of everything. We're in constant communication with the embassy, so we know as soon as that passport or that visa has been approved, we inform the employer, we inform the workers, and we get the ball rolling. You guys can decide on two ways of doing this. The payment for the MRV. Legally, you guys are required to pay for the MRV fee, for the visa fee, okay, which is currently $205 per person. So you guys can decide two ways to which to do it. One way is to have the worker pay the visa fee, and when he gets to the US, you guys have to reimburse him in his first paycheck. However, we've actually found that it makes everything a lot smoother and quicker if the company pays for the MRV up front. That way there's no reimbursement, and you guys can control how many MRVs you paid. It's a lot easier to keep close tabs on all this information. But those are options. You guys get to decide which ones you want. The program also has some additional support for the workers. Before the workers leave, a lot of them haven't even been to neighboring countries like Guatemala or Honduras before. So it's a very exciting time, but some of them might get a little anxious. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the program provides pre-departure briefings to the workers to explain a lot of different things, such as U.S. tax obligations, to go over potential pay stub formats, to explain about the discounts that they're going to get for any local taxes or FICA or whatever. We explain about W-2s and how they're supposed to be getting them around January, et cetera, because if the employee is informed, they're going to be a lot less anxious, and they can just focus on doing a good job. I always say that a happy employee is an effective employee. Also, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through its monitoring division, they're in constant communication with the workers, just to make sure that everything is going well, to help them get in touch with their families. That way they can really focus on the work. And if there's any issues that arise, you can always discuss that, talk with me or talk with members of the program, and we'll make sure that everything gets fixed in a very amicable way. So we go through the selection process, we go through the visa process, we go through the pre-departure process, and then we go and pack our bags. Okay, so it's really important. What Jennifer was mentioning, the employers are required to pay for transportation from where the worker is to the United States. Okay, but we want to make things a lot cheaper and easier for you guys. We have a very strong alliance with some airlines. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, with United Airlines. And United Airlines, we have a lot of perks. As of September 2023, I'm sorry I didn't fix the year. As of this month, these perks include a 10 to 15 discount on airfare for groups traveling together. For every 15th passenger, the 16th passenger flies for free. Free with the quotes, because taxes, death and taxes, nobody can escape those. We get a best rate guarantee, which means that, let's say, for example, if you're looking at somewhere from United Airlines, from American Airlines, United Airlines will try its best to match that fare. That way you're going to keep your business with them. We have a specialized team here in El Salvador that's dedicated to handle your business. I really hope that none of you have gone through this awful experience in which you're at the airport and you're trying to fix something with the airline, and you call a call center and you're on hold for about 2 hours. We actually have a team of people that are dedicated for the program that are going to solve whatever issue you might have. This is really good because it gives you a lot of flexibility. Let's say, for example, you're going to hire me and I'm supposed to travel tomorrow, but for whatever reason, I missed my flight. Um, you guys, or actually through us, through the program, we can contact United Airlines and get me a new ticket with most of the time without any penalties whatsoever. So I'm able to travel the next time possible. Okay, so when you get groups of 20 people, for example, that's a very big savings of thousands of dollars that you might be having. So I think that's one of the perks, the most important perks that we have with them. And we have great flexibility with name changes and rebookings. Let's say, for example, Edward, he knows that he's going to send 20 people to his company, but he doesn't have the names yet. He can just book the tickets and then he can give us the names at a later time, as long as it's at least 7 days before actual flight time. So as you can see, we have a lot of benefits with them, and we're working on getting more benefits with other companies. One of the companies, Volaris, we're working on getting charter flights with them, but charters is a little bit more difficult, but we're working on them. And as soon as we have anything new, we would share it with any of the employers that work with us in the program. Now, corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is a big thing, especially if for your company to want to project a certain image. I think these numbers would be very helpful for you guys to understand. Minimum wage in El Salvador ranges from $243 to $365 per month. Sometimes you get full families of 4 to 5 people living with those $365, which is one of the main reasons why we encourage companies to pay the MRV up front, because we've actually had situations in which we have great candidates, but they unfortunately don't have the $205 handy to pay for the MRV, and they have to quit the process. And this actually goes and explains why this kind of situation happens. According to statistics from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, program workers hope to use the vastly superior U.S. salaries to provide better education for their children, build a respectable home for the family, or start a business. So as you can see, you and your companies, by hiring Salvadorans, you're effectively changing lives. You're making sure that your businesses stay afloat and that you have enough workers to satisfy your needs, but you're also really, really helping people and making a drastic change in their life. And later they come here to El Salvador. We have companies that work with us, and we have alliances with financial institutions to help them reinvest their earnings in El Salvador. And that also goes to making El Salvador more prosperable and reducing illegal immigration to the United States. It's a win-win for everybody. It's basically the same thing that we just went over. Oh, and here's something that's pretty big. The program benefits are free. If you are to contact me and you're going to tell me, Will, I need 50 housekeepers, I'm not going to charge you a dime. And we're not going to charge the workers a single cent either. It's like, since this is an official program between the governments of El Salvador and the government of the United States, we don't charge anybody anything. Okay, we, of course, on what we're talking about, the recruitment, the finding the workers, the processing the visas, to giving them the advice, to helping them coordinate travel to the United States, travel with the workers, any communication with the employer and the employee, etc. That's all 100% free for you guys and for us. All while greatly reducing illegal immigration by providing Salvadoran workers with a safe and legal channel to work in the United States. The program, as I mentioned before, we have an alliance with United Airlines. We have alliances with the best culinary schools here in El Salvador. We have alliances with hotels and all sorts of English academies, etc. So we're always trying to build a better workforce to make sure that each year you have a better selection. Of course, you can always select to keep using the same workers that you already hired once and you already trained and they were great. But every year your needs might grow, and we're going to have a more capable workforce at your fingertips. The jurisdiction for the program, as mentioned before, the program takes care of all recruitment needs in El Salvador. However, we do not provide support in the paperwork or processes filed before the United States Department of Labor or Department of Homeland Security. There are recruitment companies that can help you with that. There are awesome attorneys such as Jennifer Grady, who that can help you with all of that information, all of that paperwork. We're not allowed because of program regulations. We cannot. I'm sorry, I just got a text. Because of program regulations, we cannot provide assistance in filing the paperwork to the DHS or DOL. However, you can find agents that do that, but we take care of everything here in El Salvador. Some very brief numbers. Here's a very brief recap. In 2022, the program placed nearly 3,000 workers in companies all throughout the United States and its territories, every single state. And I'm actually very happy to say that we have workers all the way in Guam, which is the furthest territory in which we've sent workers this year. I think we have a crew of about 15 construction workers helping build military bases there. So as you can see, it's very varied. We send them everywhere. The next company reaping the benefits for the program might be yours. I can't really officially share the exact fiscal year 2023 results, but so far we're already above 5,000 workers for this year. So the program keeps growing year after year. And that being said, it's like the variety of the type of workers that we send to the US has also grown. It's like you get your standards like hospitality, food and beverage, cooks, housekeepers for hotels, landscaping, etc., the big ones. But we also have a lot of different fields in construction. We've sent workers for what is this? I think that the most different ones that we've sent this year are people to clean the windows of high-rise buildings, and we've even sent a group of about 5 workers to California, because it had to be California, to cut hair and style hair for dogs, for your pet. So as you can see, it's a very varied type of jobs that we will provide services for. Something that's very important that I would like you to consider is that you should also consider your supply chain. Does your company require goods and services from other companies? Is the manufacturing or deliver of these supplies slowing your company down? Then perhaps you could point your suppliers in our direction. If they have more workers, they're going to be able to provide you with the necessary stuff that you guys need. Okay, so we don't want, because they're slow, we don't want it to affect their bottom line. So maybe we can help them, and by extension, we're going to be helping you as well. And I'm really sorry, guys. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, and so yeah, I know that as Jennifer mentioned, there are certain costs that you have to pay to the DHS. But we're free, but there's an extra cost in hiring international workers, but nobody knows the cost of the losses that your company has by not having a sufficient big staff. Okay, so we are going to be able to help you guys out through the staffing problem. And finally, here's our contact information. You can copy it down. Martin, if you're there, perhaps you could also put it on the chat so it's permanent. Joining us is Martin Hansen. He is part of our team. He is the outreach coordinator. He's the one that you would most likely reach if you email those numbers or you WhatsApp that phone number. And we also have some Twitter, not Twitter, now it's X, Facebook and Instagram information in case you want to check out the different activities that we do. Make sure that we're legit. It's all in there. And that's pretty much for the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Well, thank you so much, Will. We had a fantastic presentation. We hope this was very helpful for all of you. We'll put some details in the YouTube link, and we'll update this when we get notice from Department of Labor and Congress how many visas they're going to have, supplemental visas for fiscal year 2025. So thank you so much. We're going to end this presentation. Thank you.